Hello, my name is Amy Hall. I'm an attorney with Montana Legal Services Association based in Helena. We are a statewide law firm that provides free legal assistance to Montanans who cannot afford to hire private attorneys. We assist folks in all kinds of civil legal matters. So we don't do any criminal defense, but any kind of civil legal matter, we may be able to help folks. And what I am here to talk about today are the legal impacts of COVID-19. And I wanted to start with housing rights. So let's talk for a little bit about what a renter needs to know regarding their rights in relation to COVID-19. There are three important things to keep in mind about renters' rights. One is that there can be no utility shutoffs through April 10th. So Governor Bullock has ordered that no utilities, no sewage disposal, no phone or internet services in residences may be shut off at least through April 10th. There also cannot be any late fees for those services for late payments that have become due after March 30th. So that's the first piece of good news. The number two most important thing for renters to know as far as their rights is Governor Bullock has issued a stay-at-home order for all Montanans to stay at home to try to guard against the spread of the coronavirus. And for that stay-at-home order to be meaningful, of course, people need a home to stay in. So for that reason, Governor Bullock has issued a directive that requires all landlords in Montana to put a temporary halt on all evictions related to non-payment of rent. The governor has recognized that because businesses are shut down and some people's hours have been cut, there may be some tenants in Montana who cannot afford to pay their usual amount of rent. And the governor has ordered that there's at least a temporary halt on any evictions related to non-payment of rent. So right now, that temporary halt stays in effect until April 10th. We don't yet know whether the governor may extend that order past April 10th. Currently, the governor's stay-at-home order has been extended to April 24th, and he has said he will reevaluate that order, the stay-at-home order, every 2 weeks. Something similar could happen with these eviction limits, but we're not sure yet how that will play out. We'll have to wait until after April 10th. And to find out the current information about the eviction temporary stay, please visit our website, which is montanalawhelp.org. So what does this temporary halt on evictions mean? The governor's directive limits a landlord's options concerning a tenant's non-payment of rent, utilities, or other monetary obligations. The directive orders that at least through April 10th, a residential landlord, in response to a tenant's non-payment, may not do several things, and those things include terminate a tenancy or refuse to extend a tenancy on at least a month-to-month basis. So what that means is a landlord cannot send you a letter telling you that your tenancy is being terminated for non-payment. That's the landlord's first step. If they want to pursue a legal eviction of a tenant, first they have to start with a written notice of termination. And the governor's directive specifically says that a landlord cannot do that based on non-payment at least through April 10th. The landlord also cannot charge a tenant with late fees that accrue through April 10th, and cannot increase the amount of rent that's due in most circumstances. If there's been a prior agreement by the landlord and tenant about raising the rent, or if the rent increase was already in effect and already planned before COVID-19 arose, then those kinds of rent increases can take effect. But the landlord cannot just decide to issue a rent increase if it wasn't already agreed to. The landlord also cannot request the suspension or termination of any utilities provided by the landlord to the tenant until after April 10th, and cannot report the tenant to a credit bureau for non-payment of a financial obligation. Now, one thing the governor's directive makes clear is that the tenant is still responsible for meeting all of their financial obligations under the lease. So even though the governor's directive puts a temporary stay on evictions, that doesn't mean that the tenant doesn't have the responsibility to pay the rent. Tenants still have to pay the rent, even April's rent. They may just get a little more time to make arrangements to get that rent paid. And during that time, the landlord cannot file an eviction lawsuit, at least through April 10th. Then the third thing for tenants to know about their rights related to COVID-19 is that they may get some longer term relief past April 10th from the federal government. If you are living in a federally assisted tenancy where the government perhaps pays part of your rent because you're a person who has limited or moderate income, then you may have extra protections because the federal government recently passed the CARES Act, C-A-R-E-S, in response to coronavirus. It was signed into law by President Trump on March 27th, and it includes a temporary 120-day halt on some evictions. So the federal stay is longer than Governor Bullock's stay on evictions. A landlord with any kind of federal funding, including HUD funding, which also includes landlords who rent to someone who has a Section 8 voucher, also called a housing choice voucher, landlords with USDA funded properties and tax credit properties, and properties with any federally backed mortgage are subject to the limits imposed by the Federal CARES Act. Those landlords with federally assisted funding are not allowed to file any new eviction court action for non-payment of rent against a tenant at least through July 25th of this year. So these landlords also cannot charge renters any fees or penalties for non-payment of rent during that period. But as with Governor Bullock's directive, it's important for tenants to know that the CARES Act, the Federal CARES Act, is not saying that tenants don't have to pay their rent ever. You do. All renters still have to abide by the terms of their rental contracts and pay the rent that's due under their contracts. It's just that there's a moratorium on the landlord filing an eviction under the CARES Act at least through July 25th. So that's some good news for tenants. So in summary, if you're unable to pay your rent because of the coronavirus crisis, if you're not able to pay it, you do have a little more leeway than you did before the governor's directive and before the Federal CARES Act, but you still have to pay your rent. Even with the new protections that we've talked about, tenants still have to pay their rent and meet their financial obligations under their rental agreements. So if you cannot pay your rent now, you're protected from eviction at least through April 10th under Governor Bullock's order and through July under the Federal CARES Act. But you still need to talk to your landlord about how you're going to pay the obligations that you owe. Even if it's going to take you more time, how are you going to propose to do that? Do you have relatives that you could ask for a loan to pay the landlord the rent that's due? Are there other sources of assistance? You could reach out to community organizations in your local community to find out which of those organizations might be able to help you. A good place to start is by calling 211 on your phone. That will link you to an operator who can connect you with whatever resources are in your community for helping you pay the rent. Another thing to keep in mind about these new coronavirus protections is they don't protect you if you are in violation of your lease in a way other than non-payment of rent. So the federal law and Governor Bullock's directive only protect you in the instance of non-payment, not if you're being evicted for damaging the property or for some other reason that's not directly related to non-payment of rent. So just keep in mind that communication with your landlord is key. Whatever issue you're experiencing in your rental, be sure to contact your landlord in a safe manner by email or by phone to discuss whatever the issue is in your tenancy, and try to work that out with your landlord. One other thing to keep in mind that might be a source of help if you are behind on the rent is that the federal government has also passed an act that allows for economic stimulus payments to be sent to individual residents of the U.S. So if your adjusted gross income was under $75,000 in 2019, and you have a Social Security number and you filed a tax return, you could be getting a payment from the federal government of $1,200 as a result of the economic stimulus bill, which is the CARES Act that we've talked about. And those payments are expected to be issued as soon as April 17th. So if you are behind on the rent, maybe you could use your economic stimulus money to help pay forward some of that rent that's due. Okay, so those are the three main things to keep in mind about renters' rights in Montana related to COVID-19. What about homeowners' rights and the rights of folks who have mortgages on a building that they own? What do they need to know about their rights related to COVID? The first thing to keep in mind is, again, there can be no utility shutoffs in any residential utility service at least through April 10th, and no late fees on those payments that may have accrued after March 30th. The second thing is that Governor Bullock's directive has ordered a temporary halt on some actions related to mortgages and to involuntary losses of homes related to the coronavirus. So in his directive, Governor Bullock puts a limit on foreclosures and other involuntary sales of property, at least through April 10th, which may be extended further. That remains to be seen. So again, please tune in to our website, which is montanalawhelp.org, to get current information on any limits on foreclosures in Montana. But what the Foreclosure Directive means right now is that there can be no trustee sale, no sheriff's sale, or other involuntary sale of residential real property in Montana. Could include a mobile home if the mobile home has a mortgage on it, the mobile home and land. And it could contain up to from 1 to 4 family housing units in the same mortgage, or individual units, or just a single family home. But there can be no action for foreclosure of the mortgage or trust indenture or other lien on residential real estate. So that's a really strong protection for homeowners and mortgage borrowers. There also can't be any court actions trying to establish a foreclosure or cause someone to vacate their home related to a delinquent mortgage. There also cannot be any reporting of the borrower to a credit bureau for being behind on the mortgage during this time. Again, though, it's important to note that the borrower ultimately still has the responsibility to pay their obligations under their mortgage. Governor Bullock's order just puts a temporary stay on any foreclosure action. And note that Governor Bullock's order applies to all mortgages in Montana, not just federally backed mortgages. The third protection for homeowners related to COVID-19 is the longer-term relief provided by the federal government for mortgages which are federally backed. And that act was passed on March 27th by the President, and it includes limits on foreclosure for certain loans on single-family properties. So who is protected under the federal act? Those are borrowers with federally backed mortgage loans and tenants living in those buildings with federally backed mortgage loan. And a federally backed mortgage loan is a loan that is owned, insured, or guaranteed by one of the following entities: HUD, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Agriculture, or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. If you have questions about whether your mortgage is covered by one of those federal entities, you can go to a website for the National Housing Law Project. That's nhlp.org. And they have really detailed suggestions for how to figure out whether your mortgage is federally backed. Their estimate is that about 70% of all mortgages in the country are federally backed in some manner. So what does this federal limit on foreclosures do? It prevents mortgage servicers from initiating a foreclosure, seeking a court order for foreclosure judgment or order of sale, and from holding a foreclosure sale or executing a foreclosure-related eviction. So none of those activities can happen through May 17th of this year. And of course, that federal deadline could also be extended. So what should you do if you're a homeowner with a mortgage and you're afraid you're not going to be able to make your payments because of COVID-19? In those circumstances, your mortgage servicer, the company that you pay your mortgage payments to, may have the obligation to offer you a forbearance plan. What that means is that your mortgage payments would be reduced or suspended for a certain time period. So you could contact your mortgage servicer right now and ask for your payments to be suspended or reduced. And then that plan, your forbearance plan, would set out the terms of that forbearance, how long it would last, and what your payments would be, if anything, during the period of forbearance. If you request assistance because you're experiencing financial hardship caused directly or indirectly by COVID-19, your servicer must offer you a forbearance of up to 180 days. So that's 6 months, which is a great benefit for borrowers. And then at the end of that 180-day period, you can ask for an extension of another 180 days if you still are being affected by the COVID crisis. And it doesn't have to be a direct impact by COVID. You don't have to have lost a job yourself because of COVID, but if you're having to stay home and take care of your child because the school has been canceled, or take care of an elderly relative who has COVID and needs assistance with health care, it can be those indirect impacts from COVID as well that qualify you for a forbearance. It doesn't have to be a direct loss of income because you are sick with COVID or you lost your job because of COVID. But again, be cautious about a forbearance, because once the period of forbearance ends, you will be responsible for making the payments that were suspended during the period of forbearance. So if you can afford to pay your mortgage despite everything that's going on with COVID-19, it's best to go ahead and pay your mortgage. But if you can't, there are some options in getting your mortgage servicer to suspend those payments. Keep in mind that it's up to you to contact your mortgage servicer to request any kind of assistance related to your mortgage. None of these things are going to happen automatically. It's up to you as the borrower to request the assistance related to your mortgage. And keep in mind, if you need help with a civil legal problem related to coronavirus or any other civil legal problem, please reach out to us. You can apply online on our website at mtlsa.org, or you can call our toll-free helpline, which is 1-800-666-6899. You can also go to our website for all kinds of information about your legal rights and in more detail than I've given today. That website is montanalawhelp.org. Thank you.